Oh, welcome to NASCAR Race Preview Grid Live for Martinsville to Cookout 400. Big race weekend for the Cup Series, the paperclip, and of course, encourage everyone in the chat room participate. I'm Joe Samaniego. With me, we have Tanner Smith from Pitbox Press and Jonathan Fields from the Racing Experts. A big thank you to our Patreon investors calling the show, Mark, Ron, David, and Matthew. Link in the video description to invest in the Grid Network through Patreon. You can also do a one-time contribution through Buy Me a Coffee or YouTube Super Chat. We'll thank you on the air. And of course, gentlemen, Martinsville, a paperclip, the first short track of the year. Plenty of questions entering this race. Let's start off with, I think, the biggest question, tires. I've heard a lot of people talk about tires. Goodyear's bringing the same tire we saw in November, which are softer than we saw last April here, where we saw essentially a little bit of a harder tire. And of course, Byron take that win. November, 15 lead changes in that race. That's more than April 2024 at 13. So just 2 more extra. But the forecast is very interesting. Potential chance of rain. Much cooler day. Of course, if it's raining and if it stops, they do have those tires to go out there on a damp track, but not racing the rain. Jonathan, do you anticipate a drastic change in the racing product with the colder temperatures?
I think, first of all, I want to say thank you, Joe, for having me on. This is always fun coming on Grid Network here. The tires, we saw it in November of how when the sun went down, you even saw the guys kind of coming and going through the field. You saw Ryan Blaney really making a charge to the front. I think that really showed what these tires could do. And as you see here, Ryan Blaney, of course, the favorite to win. But I think that really showed what the tires could do in cooler conditions. We saw that as well at Bowman Gray, where the same tire compound was really wearing out and really producing those comers and goers that we really like to see at these short track races like Martinsville, like Bowman Gray Stadium. So I think we're going to see I think this tire is real good. I think we're going to see some good racing. I don't think it's going to be too drastic as people may think.
Well, for our sake as fans and media, I certainly hope so. Yeah, I think Jonathan brings up a good point with this being a similar tire to what we brought to Bowman Gray, if not exactly the same. And yes, even there, it showed a good bit of wear, especially around the lap 80 mark, where in the first segment of the clash, we saw Chase Elliott, who was the dominant car of the event and went on to win, struggle a little bit on that longer run and had some of his competitors start to catch up to him towards the end of that first segment. So given that last fall we had about a 65-degree day, I do think that these tires could stand to take these colder temperatures more so than in years previous. So I would like to hope that we won't have any sort of adverse effects as far as tire wear is concerned, but I wouldn't rule it out. It's certainly something we've seen here in the past where if the concrete gets a little too cold in the turns, it doesn't really take rubber very well. So that's something to look out for. But like I said, we have a bit more documented proof that these tires in particular, this particular compound, can withstand these colder temperatures. So hopefully it won't infringe on the product too much.
Don't anticipate a repeat of Bristol last year when the temperature was really down there and tires were just wearing out, and you had a fresh set of tires you were just going through. That was a really crazy event. I don't anticipate that either. If so, that'll be pretty crazy. But I think overall, like you both are saying, this tire, I think, is going to handle the cooler temperatures pretty well. The last time the winner started in the top 10, surprising 2022, William Byron. Since then, the winner has come from 11th through 12th. But here's the interesting part. The last time the winner was not from Hendrick Motorsports, Joe Gibbs Racing, or Team Penske was Clint Boyer in 2018. Tanner, do you anticipate the winner's more likely to come from one of those big 3 teams I mentioned, or somebody from outside that top 10, that unique streak that seems to be going?
I'd like to point out something. So in our question script, fall 2001 is cited here as the last time a true powerhouse team did not come out on top in Martinsville. And fun fact, that was the very first race I attended when I was 4 years old. So that's about how far we're talking in the past. I would say that one of the top 5 teams in the sport is going to win this weekend, whether that be Hendrick, Gibbs, or Penske, or 2311 or Trackhouse. It will be one of those 5 teams, and I would say that it would be a significant upset if any of the other teams happen to contend, but I wouldn't rule out someone like Front Row making an appearance closer to the front. Obviously, Todd Gilliland won his infamous first truck race there back in 2019 when he told Kyle Busch, his car owner at the time, to stay in his motorhome. And in addition to that, you also have someone like Noah Gragson, who has won here in the Xfinity Series and contended pretty much every race that he was in the Truck Series at that track. And Zane Smith, I believe, has a grandfather clock of his own from a Truck Series race in 2021. So if any of the non-power teams goes on to win this weekend, I would expect it would come out of either the Front Row shop or, God forbid, Eric Jones gets up there and contends.
Definitely. Yeah. And yeah, fall 2001, like you mentioned, that was, the single car operation, of course, of, Cal Wells, PPI. And funny you mentioned Eric Jones, because of course, Cal Wells is now with Legacy Motor Club. And so, Martinsville is really the place where like the best teams rise to the occasion. And I think you're going to see Hendrick rising to the occasion. I think this is the weekend where Chase Elliott wants to get some redemption, because of course, last year in the fall, he led late, didn't get it done. In overtime, he was really on William Byron's bumper, didn't get it done. It's been about 4 or 5 years, fall 2020, since he's won at this track. And, he's had other races before where he's almost won, didn't win, had a heartbreak, fall 2017 with Denny Hamlin and all that. So I think this is the weekend for the powerhouse teams. I also think, too, this could be a race where someone could maybe make a statement, outside of the Hendrick, outside of the Gibbs, Penske, maybe someone like a few names that I think Joe is going to mention very, very soon here.
Yeah, it's always interesting because when it comes to short track racing, we often think of short track drivers that cut their teeth into short tracks, could make the best out of equipment that's not exactly the high caliber as the top teams, make their way to the front. But when you look at the record at Martinsville, like you said, the Hendricks, they seem to make this their home almost. Gibbs, Team Penske, Ryan Blaney, the favorite from DraftKings, the odd makers. It's really a phenomenal thing to be seeing, because when I think of short track racing, some of the drivers I think of have to include Ryan Preece, who with RFK Racing off to a pretty good start. Josh Berry, late models, he got that win. Chris Buescher, again, another RFK, 3 Fords, in fact, right there. What about the Toyotas? I think you mentioned Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick. Those Toyotas are capable. And Richard Childress Racing, maybe a hit or a miss, hopefully not a door hit from RC himself, but overall, I feel you got drivers that could go out there, make some noise. Jonathan, are any of those drivers you see potential winners? Or is this a list of just some of the favorites out there?
Yeah, if you go back to that, actually here, just looking at this second page here, I see a few good names. I see someone like AJ Allmendinger, who has had some really good runs the last couple of weeks. He's run well at Martinsville before. Not so much racing for the win, but I see someone like Shane Van Gisbergen, who had a top 10 last fall. Looking at this list here, if we could go back to the first page, kind of look through and see. Thank you. Josh Berry, I think, is another one. He's been running very well, the first few weeks. He got the win in Las Vegas. He had some setbacks last week, but this is his playground coming here. The Bubba Wallace, in the spring ran really well last year. So I don't know, Tanner, if you were betting, or hypothetically, because obviously we don't want to promote that, but who stands out to you?
Yeah, so just wanted to clarify, SVG actually finished 12th, but if the bow tie blockade hadn't happened, perhaps maybe he gets a top 10 last year. But enough about that. As far as this weekend's concerned, I started licking my chops when I saw Bubba Wallace at plus 3,000. A 30-1 odds for a guy that's won 2 truck races here and has a pretty solid record in the Cup Series at this track. That's easy money, in my opinion, for a top 5. Same thing with Josh Berry at plus 2,800. I mean, the guy has a very defined record here, considering his late model starts, his Xfinity Series resume. I obviously touched on the 3 front row drivers, but AJ Allmendinger was one that I was definitely going to point out. He has had a couple of close calls at victory here in the past. I believe the 2012 spring race when Clint Boyer made his notorious dive bomb move off of the fender of Ryan Newman and cleaned out the Hendrick cars. I believe AJ ended up finishing second that day, and I believe finished third the day that Logano got speared into the fence by Matt Kenseth. So he's definitely had his fair share of close calls at victory here, so I would not be surprised. But, Joe, I'm kind of surprised you put Tyler Reddick even on that graphic. He has had a tremendously awful time at Martinsville Speedway, and I don't know what it is. It must just not lend to his driving style or something, but it's something I've kind of noticed with him at these like flatter tracks. He's not exactly as equipped at them for whatever reason. He wasn't a factor last year at Phoenix's championship race, and really since he's joined 2311, he hasn't really had speed at Phoenix. Martinsville, as we've seen, not really strong there. So I would actually not advise anybody to put Tyler Reddick into their top 10 this weekend. He's just not really strong here, so he's the opposite of a contender.
Oh man, hating on Reddick. It's gonna be interesting to see.
I'm not hating. I promise. I'm just recognizing what he is, and he's just not really good here for whatever reason, unfortunately.
It's gonna be really interesting to see how everything shakes up. And of course, we have 2 drivers in the field we haven't seen before. Casey Mears, of course, start number 490. First time in this car. I don't anticipate a miraculous run. If he finishes the race, kudos, great job, working your way to 500 starts. And Burt Myers, Team Amerivet Chevrolet. Yeah, he has a short track race, and he was at the Cookout Clash. What will happen between him and Ricky Stenhouse Jr.? I don't think he's going to mess up his race just because Ricky Stenhouse full-time, Burt. Maybe we'll just make it a little tricky to get around him, but it's going to be really interesting to see with their equipment what they could do. I anticipate they're just not going to be a factor for the win. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and do a lightning round. So, Trackhouse Racing, Chastain, Suarez, or SVG, who finishes ahead?
I'm going to take Chastain.
Chastain, okay. I'm going to go contrarian. I'll say Daniel Suarez.
Ooh, I think I'm going to go with Chastain as well. Riley Hurst fell to 31st in the points. Could pressure build on him to perform?
I think he's off to a solid start with the season. I mean, he hasn't really been the flashiest driver, but he's been getting the car home in one piece, learning about the Gen 7 car. I don't think there's any pressure right now.
Yeah, very little pressure on a rookie and less than, I believe, his 10th start. He only got caught up in one wreck at Phoenix, and that wasn't his fault. So, yeah, bringing the car home is good enough usually.
I think the pressure is not there yet. It's way too early. He's a rookie. You got to give him time. We're not talking about Red Bull, of course, but he is with Monster Energy, the other energy drink option. Justin Haley, yes, finished in the top 10 last race weekend. Tanner, can he do it again?
No.
No, unfortunately, I don't think so.
I'm thinking no as well, too. Spire has a way to go before they put together a perfect race. For the first time since October 2021, 38 cars in the field. Could this make pit road just a bit more hectic, Jonathan?
I think they'll resolve it unless there's an early caution and, you have everybody on pit road and it's right within the window of the tires. But I think it's going to be okay.
Considering the two cars are the 66 and the 50, no, I don't think it'll be any more hectic than usual. There'll be plenty of laps down.
And there's an early retirement back down to 37, maybe even 36. Last time we saw manufacturers working the results occur right here in Martinsville. When it comes to the manufacturer has the most cars in the top 10, who are you looking at, Jonathan?
I think Chevrolet, just considering the talent pool in that manufacturer, Chevrolet.
I'm going with Ford. The 4 Penske cars should be in the top 10, and if they aren't, then Roger's got some explaining to do with the shop.
Be interesting. If there's no Penske cars in the top 10, that would be a really bad day, and I would not be wanting to be at the shop on Monday. That was our lightning round. Now, one of the biggest challenges of this race is the potential of beating and banging. You could have a fast car. You could dominate this race, but wrong place, wrong time. You get somebody upset. They put you into the wall. However, since Circuits of the Americas, we have seen rather clean racing in the Cup Series. We have not had overtime since Atlanta. No controversies, thankfully, for the last few weeks, at least when it comes to yellow flags and overtime and all that. It's just good racing. Tanner, are we seeing a change in the respect level from the drivers? Or could we see the racing get physical, especially for the win?
I definitely think at a track like Martinsville, the bumper is always available. It's like the bank. It's always open. So I would say that the reason we haven't seen as much contact over the past few weeks, even going back to Phoenix, lends to the driving style necessary at those tracks and the high speeds. Obviously, we had some contact, throughout the pack at all 3 of the last 3 events, but at the end of the day, I just don't see Vegas being a place where you really want to boot somebody out of the way, more or less. So Martinsville obviously invites those opportunities at every braking zone. So 1,000 braking zones over the course of a race, you have 1,000 opportunities to get into somebody. So definitely think we could see some tempers flaring up this season, especially at Martinsville, with spring coming in and the temperature starting to rise.
Yeah, I think that, when it gets down to the end of it, when the guys are racing for the win, we'll definitely see the bumper used. But I think it's going to be on a level of what we saw at Bowman Gray, where guys are able to, bump the other guy out of the way to let them know, hey, I'm here, kind of the old style, 1 bump, that's okay, 2 bumps, get out of my way or you're going to end up in the fence. I think the guys have really learned how to maneuver it with the N7 car, where the rear ends are more rigid, and you really have to bump someone. So I think a lot of what you saw in the Clash is going to appear in Martinsville. And I mean, same tire and everything. And you know what? Like I wrote in the script comments, are we going to see physical racing? Absolutely. It is Martinsville. I would be very disappointed if we did not see that at some point in the race.
Yeah, I feel you're going to see bumping. You're going to see the banging. I mean, you have 38 cars going to that first corner. It's just bound to be contact. I think it depends on also which drivers are up towards the front. If you have drivers like from Team Penske, Hendricks, Gibbs, maybe even Josh Berry, the Wood brothers, or Bubba Wallace, 2311, you're not going to see them just clean out somebody. What I am curious about, if we get somebody like what happened in Richmond, Austin Dillon, strong run, would he again try to get really physical to just clear somebody out of the way? Carson Hocevar, he's ruffled feathers. Ross Chastain is a very interesting character too. I feel like he's one that sometimes seems like, okay, he's learning, then he does some moves where we're, okay, maybe he still has some learning to do. Christopher Bell, he has really cooled off since that winning streak. 12th at Las Vegas, of course, he had issues. 29th in Homestead, 2 tracks may anticipate he could go for the win. We know this is a sport of momentum. The competition is always evolving. If you're not working on the car race after race, within the race, chasing the track, you can fall behind towards the end. With 3 wins, Jonathan, do you believe Christopher Bell and his team are more willing to try different strategies? Because he could come back in Martinsville regardless of how the regular season goes, and again, being a must-win situation in the playoffs.
Definitely. I mean, I think every team comes into every race with the mentality of we want to win. We want to win. Because, I mean, if it isn't to get yourself locked into the playoffs, it's to build up playoff points. Like, for example, Bell last season, the situation you saw him in, and, being able to have a good setup, being able to have race winning pace, that's going to be so important when they come back here in November. Now, does the spring race always tell how the fall race is going to go? Not always, but it is kind of a good way to really see where you're at with your car and just understand, where you're at. So that way you don't come there in the fall and get behind. And I think this is a good opportunity for Bell because we saw in the fall last year where Bell was just kind of off his game. It was kind of weird to watch, honestly. And so I think they're going to really focus on trying to be good this weekend, especially after Homestead didn't go well. I know Christopher Bell loves Homestead, being a former dirt driver and, of course, winning there back in 2023. I think he's going to want to do well there and also just start racking up more playoff points. So that way, when they come back here in the fall, points aren't even an issue.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's been concerning for me that Bell and Adam Stevens haven't quite come out swinging at 2 of these tracks that they're traditionally strong at. I think, again, it's important to remember that JGR had a bit of a leadership shakeup in the offseason with Chris Gabehart moving over to competition director. And, with that is going to come some growing pains. And we've kind of seen at pretty much every race thus far that JGR has 2 good cars and 2 not so good cars. And unfortunately, every week that the non-good car has been, one of them has been Ty Gibbs. Now, the last couple weeks, we've obviously seen Christopher Bell struggle, and that's been a bit odd. But even at Vegas, he had a car capable of getting up into the top 5 and retaining the spot. So I don't really know what their lack of pace really looks like, if it's something that's more self-inflicted like last week where Bell just lost it coming out of 4, and then I would assume the underbody of the car suffered after that, and making speed becomes challenging after that. At a place like Martinsville, I think that, obviously Bell had that really poor run there in the fall, and that led to the whole snafu with Bubba Wallace and the Chevys that we don't really need to get into. And it's important to remember that Bell wasn't very far behind Byron by the end of that race. He had a top 5 capable car by the time the end of the race came along. It's just it took them way too long for them to become competitive, and they couldn't get back on the lead lap. So with all that said, I think you'll see, like Jonathan said, you'll see Adam Stevens and Christopher Bell come into this weekend with a competitive mindset, and they'll really try to aim to get some more stage points, maybe even a stage win, and land very comfortably in the top 10. They are in desperate need of a good run after their extremely hot streak, and I think that should come this weekend.
I'm really curious because if they come out and they're strong, I'll be wondering, is this something a little bit more experimental for next time? Or if they struggle, if they're knowing that, okay, it might be warmer, just because last thing you would want is to come back in the fall and you're in a must-win situation. He seems to do a good job in those must-win situations, getting those wins, but last year just did not work out. I think they could go at it. They got 3 wins. Try to learn what they can figure out right here at Martinsville. The Cookout 400 is 100 laps less than the fall race, the Xfinity 500, and 2021 was the last time we had more than 10 cautions. With this car, it seems to have sometimes the long runs, Most of the time, the pit stops will still occur under the caution, but the stage ends. They're going to be at lap 80, 180, and then, of course, the end of the race, 400. So, a rather lengthy last stage. Dan, do you anticipate some long run setups by the team?
Yes, and that's because of our past history in this spring race. Now, over the next gen era, the last 3 races in the spring have yielded 4 cautions, 5 cautions, and 5 cautions once again. So I would imagine that we're going to see something relatively similar to that. Now, with all that said, I would imagine that most of the drivers and teams, knowing that these tires are going to wear out a little bit more aggressively than tires we've brought here in the past, outside of last fall, obviously, I would imagine they're going to make these cars set up for the long haul, especially someone like Ryan Blaney, who, as TJ Majors described on Door Bumper Clear last year, he can run 500 laps 6 inches away from the curb every lap. So someone with his discipline, someone with Denny Hamlin's discipline at this track, I definitely imagine that they're going to be leaning closer to a longer run car, which, if the last 3 years are any indication, we could get a late caution, and that could throw their entire strategy for a loop. So the cautions, and when they come out, will definitely determine the outcome of this race and which cars finish up close to the front. But definitely look out for some of the drivers that are more accustomed to saving their equipment to lean into that and have more long run cars.
Like Denny Hamlin, I think he's going to be very astute at this race this weekend. And we saw him have speed back at Phoenix. Of course, another shortish track. I guess we could call it a short track for the sake of discussion here. And he's always great at Martinsville, at Bristol, always at Richmond. So he's going to be running up front. And, with the softer tire, more tire wear and kind of conserving your tires a little bit more, we're definitely going to see those long run setups, because guys will want to kind of take it easy in the first part of the run very consistent lap times all throughout. So definitely, I think we'll see long run setups definitely come into play, comers and goers.
It'll be fun to watch some long runs, the comers and goers, especially those that can make their tire work. Just a matter of, does a caution come out, shakes up everything, and can somebody try something like staying out, hoping there's enough, or 2 tires, a lot on the line as everyone tries to get a win to get into the playoffs. And of course, now it's time for us to predict who's going to win and pick a winner. Matthew still leads. He is now in double digits. Yesterday, we saw him and everyone picked Marc Marquez to again sweep the weekend. So we encourage everyone, comment in the chat room with your picks for the NASCAR Cup Series at Martinsville, and also encourage everyone with MotoGP at Circuit of Americas. Who do you think is going to win the sprint race and the Grand Prix of the Americas? Jonathan, who will win at Martinsville?
I'll throw my name. I want to get my name on this board over here. There's some elite company in there. I see Matt at the top. Want to knock him off eventually. Kobe, got to bump you guys down. I got to get up there. And so the way I'm going to start my crusade is like who I mentioned. I think Denny Hamlin's going to get it done. Look good at Phoenix. He's looked good this season. He's looked good on these tire conservation races. I'm going to go Denny Hamlin.
I'm not gonna try to knock your pick down too much, Jonathan, but he hasn't won here since the second Obama administration. That was quite some time ago.
Ooh.
I was still in high school when he won his last race at Martinsville. And the reason being is that there are guys in the field that are younger than him that know how to do it better in this car. And that one of those guys is my pick, Ryan Blaney. The guy has won 2 of these fall races in a row, and I think it's about time he adds a spring clock to his collection.
2 good picks. I'm going to go with the driver, get his first win of the year. He's in a Toyota, and he is driver of the number 23. Bubba Wallace is going to be my pick a winner.
He was my second pick.
That's good. He was good last spring.
He was good.
Yes, he was. Second in both stages, 4th in the race.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. We encourage everyone, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our programs within the motorsports this weekend. And then, of course, we'll wrap up everything on Sunday with Grid Life wrap up for the NASCAR Cup Series and MotoGP. And, of course, already we created a stream for next week's Grid Tonight. The big news, of course, Yuki Tsunoda is going to Red Bull. And, of course, next weekend, Japanese Grand Prix. We're very excited. Grid Live After Dark will be back for this year. Don't miss that program. You could do so by subscribing and hitting the bell icon. And once again, a big thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin Michelle, Mark Rowley, David, and Matthew, for keeping us on the air, allowing us to have fun, bring you great reporting from the track. We want to be on more tracks this year, and of course, right here on YouTube. For Jonathan and Tanner, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time, and enjoy the races.